I've always been the type to notice things others don't. The way shadows lengthen across the floor at dusk. How someone's voice changes when they're hiding something. The subtle shift in a room when words almost spill but then retreat, leaving only the echo of what might have been said. Maybe that's why living with Evan was both a gift and a quiet torment. We met during junior year through a mutual friend who knew we were both looking for an affordable place. The apartment was nothing special, a two-bedroom walk-up in a forgettable building with radiators that clanked through winter nights and windows that never quite kept out the summer heat. But the rent was right, and something about Evan felt immediately safe. "I'm pretty easy to live with," he'd said during that first meeting, sprawled comfortably on the couch that came with the place, his dark hair falling across his forehead. "I don't throw parties, I clean my dishes, and I make a mean chicken parmesan." I was sold before we even discussed the lease. That was 8 months ago. 8 months of discovering the rhythm of sharing space with someone who somehow made it feel effortless. 8 months of learning that Evan sang quietly to himself when he thought no one could hear, that he always slept with his door cracked open, that he left his towel on the bathroom floor despite his promises about being tidy. 8 months of something that felt like friendship, but sometimes trembled at the edges, threatening to become something I couldn't name. "Earth to Noah!" Evan's voice cut through my thoughts. "You're about to burn that garlic." I blinked, realizing I'd been standing motionless at the stove, wooden spoon suspended over the pan. The garlic was indeed darkening rapidly. "Sorry," I mumbled, quickly stirring. "Got distracted. Thinking about that manuscript again?" Evan squeezed past me to grab plates from the cabinet, his shoulder brushing mine in our narrow kitchen. The contact was brief, but electric. "You've been zoning out all week." I hadn't been thinking about my writing at all, but it was easier to nod than explain I'd been lost in thoughts of how the kitchen light caught the amber flecks in his eyes, or how his laugh seemed to physically warm the air around us. "Yeah, just plot problems." I focused intently on the pasta sauce. Hard to make the characters feel real sometimes. Evan leaned against the counter beside me, close enough that I could smell his soap. Something with sandalwood that always clung faintly to the bathroom after his showers. "Use me if you want," he offered, and my spoon faltered again. "For character stuff, I mean. Ask me how I'd react to whatever situation you're writing. Might help." I swallowed. "Thanks, maybe I will." He reached across me for the salt, his arm momentarily pressing against my chest. "Dinner in 10? "Yeah." My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. 10 minutes. This was our routine almost every night, cooking together in the kitchen that was really too small for 2 people, finding an easy choreography of movement that sometimes, like tonight, felt more intimate than it should. We'd brush past each other, reach around one another for ingredients, and occasionally bump hips or shoulders with a casualness that left me both comforted and confused. Evan treated physical contact like punctuation, small, natural touches that emphasized his words or filled the spaces between them. A hand on my shoulder when he looked at something on my laptop screen. His knee against mine when we sat on the couch. His fingers briefly squeezing my arm when I made him laugh particularly hard. I'd never been like that with my friends before, but it seemed so natural to Evan that I never questioned it. Or rather, I questioned it constantly, but only in the privacy of my own thoughts. Usually late at night when I could hear him shifting in his sleep through our shared wall. "This is seriously good," Evan said later, twirling pasta around his fork. "You've got the sauce perfect this time." We were sitting at our small table, knees occasionally bumping underneath. Rain had started outside, gentle taps against the windows that would grow heavier as the night progressed according to the weather report. "It's my mom's recipe," I said. "She'd be horrified I'm using jarred pasta, but the sauce makes up for it." "Your mom doesn't need to know our shameful pasta shortcuts." Evan grinned, reaching for his water glass. "What's family dinner like at the Chen household anyway? You never talk about home much?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was intrusive, but because Evan was right. I rarely talked about my family. Not because there was anything particularly wrong or traumatic, but because home had always been complicated. Loving, but distant. present but somehow disconnected. Pretty quiet, I said after a moment. Dad works late, Mom cooks, we eat, everyone disappears back to their corners of the house. Not much talking. Evan studied me, twirling his fork absently. That sounds lonely. It wasn't bad, I shrugged. There wasn't much to say, I guess. What about yours? Chaos, he laughed. 4 kids, 2 parents, at least 3 conversations happening at once. My dad's Italian, so there's a lot of hand gestures and interrupting. My mom's constantly telling everyone to let others finish their sentence, which of course no one does, including her. Sounds overwhelming. It is, but in a good way. His eyes softened. You should come home with me sometime, for a weekend or something. My mom would love you. The suggestion hung between us, weighted with possibilities I was afraid to consider. I focused on my plate. Maybe. Sometime. The rain grew heavier outside our windows, and Evan launched into a story about his youngest sister's latest school drama. I listened, laughing at all the right moments, while something inside my chest ached with a feeling I couldn't quite identify. After dinner came another ritual, dishes, and then a movie if neither of us had other plans. More often than not, we found ourselves on the couch together, scrolling through streaming options and debating merits of films neither of us felt strongly about. No more of your depressing indie films, Evan insisted, taking the remote from my hand. His fingers lingered against mine a moment longer than necessary. I'm still recovering from that last one where everyone died at the end. They didn't all die, I protested, and it was beautiful. It was emotional terrorism. He settled deeper into the couch, his knee pressing against mine. Tonight, we're watching something where things explode and no one has meaningful conversations about the existential void. I laughed, hyper-aware of the point of contact between us. Fine, blow things up, see if I care. He chose something with superheroes. I wasn't really paying attention to the plot. The storm outside had intensified, occasional flashes of lightning illuminating our small living room through the blinds. Evan had turned off the overhead light, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp in the corner, and the flickering blue light from the TV washed over his profile. I found myself watching him more than the movie. The way his expression changed subtly with the action on screen. How he mouthed certain lines he'd clearly seen before. The comfortable sprawl of his body, one arm stretched along the back of the couch behind me, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the presence of it, like a phantom weight across my shoulders. When a particularly loud clap of thunder rattled the windows, Evan jumped slightly, then laughed at himself. Still scared of storms? I teased, remembering how he'd admitted once, after a few beers, that thunderstorms had terrified him as a child. Not scared, he corrected, shifting slightly closer so our thighs were now firmly pressed together, just respectful of nature's power. Right, I nodded solemnly. Very manly of you. He shoved my shoulder playfully, but didn't move away. Shut up and watch the movie, Chen. I tried, but all I could focus on was the warmth of his leg against mine, and how neither of us moved to break that contact for the remaining hour of the film. 3 days later, I was typing at the kitchen table when I heard the bathroom door open, followed by the padding of bare feet across our apartment's worn hardwood floors. I glanced up automatically, then froze, fingers hovering over my keyboard. Evan stood in the hallway, hair wet and tousled from the shower, a towel wrapped around his waist and nothing else. Water droplets still clung to his shoulders and chest, catching the afternoon light from our windows. He wasn't overly muscular, more lean and defined, with the natural athleticism of someone who ran several times a week but didn't obsess over the gym. I should have looked away. A normal roommate would have barely registered the sight, but I couldn't seem to redirect my gaze, taking in details I would later replay in my mind with equal parts shame and longing. The trail of darker hair below his navel, the slight hollow at the base of his throat, the way his collarbone created shadows beneath it. Sorry, he said, not sounding particularly apologetic. Forgot to grab clothes before my shower. I realized I'd been staring when our eyes met, and something in his expression shifted. A flicker of recognition, curiosity. Whatever it was, It sent heat rushing to my face. No problem, I managed, dropping my gaze back to my laptop screen where the words had become meaningless symbols. Happens. He didn't move immediately, and in my peripheral vision, I could see him still watching me, head slightly tilted. Then he cleared his throat. Working on your novel? I nodded without looking up, typing random letters just to appear occupied. How's it going? Good, I said too quickly. Fine, just, writing. There was a pause that stretched too long, filled with something unspoken that made the air feel suddenly thick. Right, he finally said, his voice quieter than before. I'll let you get back to it. I kept my eyes fixed on my screen as he disappeared into his bedroom, listening to the soft click of his door. Only then did I exhale, deleting the nonsense I'd typed and dropping my head into my hands. This was getting out of control. Whatever this feeling was, I needed to bury it before it ruined the best living situation, the best friendship I'd ever had. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in weeks. I'd kept one since high school, though lately entries had become sporadic. Quick notes about writing ideas or brief observations rather than the emotional excavation of my teenage years. But tonight, with rain once again pattering against my window and the muffled sounds of Evan talking on the phone in the next room, I felt compelled to try making sense of the confusion that had been building inside me. I don't know what's happening to me lately. Everything feels charged with meaning I can't decipher. Or maybe I can, but I'm afraid to. Evan walked around shirtless today, and I couldn't look away. What kind of roommate does that make me? What kind of friend? He's always been physical. Touches that should be casual, but somehow aren't, at least not to me. Has he always stood that close in the kitchen? Has his hand always lingered when he passes me things? Or am I imagining significance where there's only habit? Sometimes I think I feel too much. And he doesn't feel at all. He's just naturally warm with everyone. I've seen how he is with his other friends, always an arm around shoulders, playful shoves, easy affection that doesn't mean anything special. But then, sometimes he looks at me and I could swear. I stopped writing, pen hovering over the page. Through the wall, I heard Evan laugh at something on his call, that full, uninhibited laugh that seemed to use his entire body. The sound tightened something in my chest. I can't do this. I can't ruin what we have. But I don't know how much longer I can pretend I don't feel whatever this is. I closed the journal and turned off my lamp, lying in darkness as the storm intensified outside. Across the hall, Evan's voice continued its muffled cadence, occasionally rising with laughter or emphasis before falling back to an indistinct murmur. I wondered who he was talking to. If it was someone special, if he ever thought about me when I wasn't in the room, the way I constantly thought about him. Weekends usually found us on different schedules. Evan typically went for long runs, met friends for brunch, or picked up extra shifts at the bookstore where he worked part-time. I often used the quiet apartment to write, or occasionally met my friend Lily for coffee and complaints about her latest dating disaster. This Saturday, however, a steady downpour had derailed Evan's running plans, leaving both of us unexpectedly sharing the apartment all day. I was curled in the corner of the couch with my laptop, supposedly working on my novel, but actually staring at the same paragraph for the past 20 minutes when Evan emerged from his room. I'm going stir-crazy, he announced, falling dramatically onto the other end of the couch. Entertain me, Noah. I glanced up, trying to ignore how good he looked in his faded university sweatshirt, the sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms that shouldn't have been fascinating but somehow were. I'm working, I said, gesturing to my laptop. Some of us have deadlines. Self-imposed deadlines, he countered. Which means they can be self-unimposed. He nudged my leg with his foot. Come on, let's do something. Like what? It's pouring outside. We could cook something complicated, or build a fort. Or play that board game my sister gave me for Christmas that we've never opened. His eyes lit up. Or we could rearrange the furniture. This place needs a refresh. I couldn't help smiling at his enthusiasm. This was Evan, boundless energy barely contained in a perpetually moving body, always seeking the next experience, the next connection. the opposite of my careful, observing nature. I'm not helping you move the couch for the third time this year, I said firmly. But I could be convinced to try that game. He grinned, victorious. I'll get it. It's some strategy thing where you build civilizations, or trade resources, or something. Sounds thrilling, I deadpanned, but I was already saving my document and closing my laptop. The game turned out to be surprisingly engaging, or maybe it was just the company. We sat cross-legged on the floor at the coffee table, game board between us, as the rain created a cozy soundtrack. Evan was competitive but playful, dramatically bemoaning his losses and celebrating his victories with raised arms and ridiculous victory dances that made me laugh despite myself. "You're actually good at this," he said after I'd won my second consecutive round. I thought writers were supposed to be dreamy and impractical, not strategic masterminds. Stereotyping artists? Very narrow-minded of you, I replied, organizing my game pieces for another round. What can I say? You continue to surprise me, Noah Chen. There was something in his voice that made me look up, finding his eyes already on me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Warm but searching, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a rumble of thunder that momentarily broke the moment. One more game, he asked, already resetting the board. I demand a chance at redemption. Fine, but when I win again, you're making dinner. His smile widened. Deal, but when I win, you have to read me the latest chapter of your book. My stomach dropped. That's not fair. My writing isn't ready for... Too late. Deal struck. He extended his hand across the table for a shake, eyes challenging. After a moment's hesitation, I took his hand. His palm was warm against mine, grip firm but gentle. Fine, but don't complain when you're cooking dinner later. I lost that round. Whether it was because I was distracted by the lingering sensation of his hand in mine, or because he suddenly played with unexpected strategy, I couldn't say. But an hour later, I found myself reluctantly opening my laptop as Evan settled onto the couch beside me, far closer than necessary on the spacious furniture. You don't have to do this, I said, still hesitating. I can make dinner instead. No way. I won fair and square. He tucked one leg underneath him, turning to face me more fully. I've been curious about your writing for months. You never let anyone see it. Because it's not ready, I mumbled, staring at my screen. The truth was more complicated. My novel was deeply personal, a coming-of-age story about a young man slowly recognizing his identity. And though the plot was different from my life, the emotional landscape was revealing in ways that made me feel vulnerable. It doesn't have to be perfect, Evan said, his voice gentler. It's just me. That was precisely the problem. It was him. Just don't expect too much, I finally said, opening the document. And remember, it's a very rough draft. I began reading, my voice initially unsteady but gradually finding its rhythm as I fell into the familiar words. The chapter I'd chosen was one of the less revealing ones, a scene where my protagonist has a conversation with his best friend about their futures, their fears, their dreams beyond the small town they're both desperate to escape. As I read, I grew increasingly aware of Evan's stillness beside me. He wasn't fidgeting or interrupting as I'd expected. Instead, he was completely focused, eyes sometimes on me, sometimes distant, as if seeing the scenes I described. When I finished, the silence stretched between us, filled only by the steady drum of rain. Noah, he finally said. His voice different somehow. Softer, more serious. That was really beautiful. I closed my laptop, embarrassed by the praise. It needs a lot of work. No, listen to me. His hand found my arm, squeezing gently until I met his eyes. You have a gift, the way you described how it feels to be young and uncertain and wanting something you can't name yet. It was like you were inside my head when I was 18. There was an intensity to his gaze that made it difficult to breathe. We were sitting close enough that I could see the varying shades of brown in his eyes, the slight stubble along his jaw that he'd missed while shaving that morning. Thank you, I said quietly. His hand was still on my arm, thumb moving slightly back and forth across my sleeve in what might have been an unconscious gesture. Will you let me read more sometime? I hesitated, then nodded. Maybe, when it's further along. I'd like that. His voice had dropped to nearly a whisper, and I realized we'd somehow drifted even closer, the space between us now just inches. For one wild, terrifying moment, I thought he might be leaning in. His eyes dropped briefly to my mouth, and everything in the room seemed to still, even the air between us feeling suddenly charged. Then his phone rang, a shrill interruption that made us both jump. He blinked, as if coming out of a daze, and the moment shattered. Sorry, he muttered, reaching for his phone on the coffee table. A name flashed on the screen, Michael, and something in Evan's expression shifted. I should take this. He stood abruptly, answering as he walked toward his bedroom. Hey, Mike. Yeah, I'm free to talk. His door closed, leaving me alone with my thundering heart and the lingering question of what might have happened if the phone hadn't rung. 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. Neither of us mentioned that moment on the couch, but something had undeniably shifted between us. Evan seemed more careful suddenly, less casually tactile, more conscious of the space he occupied. Our kitchen choreography became deliberate rather than intuitive, as if he was actively ensuring we didn't brush against each other. I told myself this was good. Whatever had been building had clearly been recognized as a mistake, a momentary confusion he was now correcting. This was Evan being a considerate roommate, maintaining appropriate boundaries. So why did it hurt so much? I threw myself into my writing, using the emotional confusion as fuel. My protagonist's journey suddenly felt less fictional, his longing and uncertainty mirroring my own in ways that made the words flow easily, if painfully. I stayed up late, typing until my eyes burned, and left early for the library or coffee shops, avoiding the apartment when I knew Evan would be home. On Friday night, exactly 16 days after that rainy afternoon, not that I was counting, Evan knocked on my bedroom door. I was lying in bed reading, but not absorbing the words on the page, when his gentle tap pulled me back to the present. Come in, I called, sitting up and setting my book aside. He opened the door, but remained in the doorway, one shoulder leaning against the frame. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes that I hadn't noticed earlier. Hey, he said, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I feel like I've barely seen you lately. I shrugged, aiming for casual. Been busy with the book. Inspiration hit, I guess. He nodded, gaze dropping to the floor, and then back to me. That's good. I'm glad. He hesitated, then added, I miss our movie nights, though. The simple admission caught me off guard. Oh. Yeah, so... He straightened, shoving his hands in his pockets. I was thinking maybe we could watch something tonight. I'll even let you pick one of your depressing indie films. The olive branch was so unexpected, so welcome, that I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. Really? You're volunteering for emotional trauma? His answering smile was genuine this time, eyes crinkling at the corners. What can I say? Maybe I'm feeling masochistic tonight. Give me 5 minutes, I said, already reaching for my hoodie at the foot of the bed. He nodded, looking relieved. I'll make popcorn. 20 minutes later, we were settled on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between us and one of my favorite films queued up. Evan had left a deliberate space between us, not obvious enough to seem pointed, but noticeable to me, who had cataloged every inch of his presence for months. Outside, the weather was turning again, the wind picking up and rain beginning to patter against the windows. The meteorologist had warned of a significant storm system moving through overnight, with possible thunder and strong winds. So what's this movie about? Evan asked, reaching for popcorn. It's about a man who returns to his hometown after his father dies and reconnects with his childhood best friend, I explained, deliberately omitting that the reconnection becomes a profound love story. And let me guess, everyone's sad and nothing works out. I laughed despite myself. Just watch it, Cardoza. You might actually like it. As the film progressed, I found myself watching Evan's reactions more than the screen. I'd seen this movie at least 5 times before, but I'd never watched it with someone else, especially not someone whose opinion suddenly mattered so much. I noticed how he leaned forward during tense scenes, how his expression softened during the more emotional moments, how he occasionally glanced at me as if checking my reaction to his reaction. About halfway through, there is a scene where the main characters share an intimate conversation that culminates in their first kiss. It's beautifully shot, all soft lighting and hesitant touches, building slowly to a moment of connection that had made me cry the first time I watched it. As the scene began, I became acutely aware of Evan beside me. The popcorn bowl had been set aside, the space between us no longer occupied by anything but tension. In my peripheral vision, I saw him grow still, his breathing changing subtly. On screen, the characters moved closer, one gently touching the other's face. Beside me, Evan shifted, and I felt his gaze leave the TV and turn to me. I kept my eyes resolutely forward, heart hammering in my chest. "Noah," he said quietly, just as the characters on screen finally kissed. Lightning flashed outside, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The apartment plunged into darkness, the TV screen going black mid-scene. "Shit," Evan muttered, and I heard him fumbling for his phone. The blue light of his screen illuminated his face a moment later. "Power's out in the whole building, looks like." The moment, whatever it might have been, was broken. I reached for my own phone, turning on the flashlight. "I'll find the candles," I said, standing perhaps too quickly. "I think we still have some from the last outage." We spent the next half hour setting up candles around the apartment and checking the building's group chat for updates about the power. The storm outside intensified, rain now lashing against the windows and wind howling around the building's corners. By the time we'd settled back in the living room, sitting on the floor surrounded by the warm glow of candlelight, the movie and its interrupted moment felt distant. "They're saying it could be out until morning," Evan said, scrolling through messages on his phone. "Tree down on a power line a few blocks over." I nodded, watching the shadows play across his face. In the flickering light, his features seemed softer somehow, more vulnerable. "We should probably just call it a night then," I suggested, though it was barely 10 p.m. "Save our phone batteries." "Yeah, probably smart." He set his phone down but made no move to get up. After a moment, he asked, "How does the movie end?" I smiled faintly. "I thought you didn't care about my depressing indie films." "I'm invested now," he admitted with a small shrug. "Even if I only saw half of it." I considered how to answer. The main character has to decide whether to stay in his hometown with the person he's reconnected with or return to his life in the city. And what does he choose? "He chooses love," I said simply. "Even though it's complicated and scary." Evan was quiet for a long moment, eyes reflecting the candle flames. "Good for him." We sat in silence after that, neither of us leaving despite having agreed the night was over. The storm provided a chaotic soundtrack to the stillness between us, punctuated occasionally by distant thunder. I finally began, gesturing vaguely toward my bedroom. "Yeah," Evan nodded. "Me too." We both stood, gathering our phones and extinguishing most of the candles, leaving just one for each of us to light our way to our rooms. At my bedroom door, Evan paused, his candlelight creating a small circle of warmth in the dark hallway. "Good night, Noah," he said, his voice hushed as if we were in a space more sacred than our ordinary apartment. "Good night," I replied, watching as he entered his room, the soft click of his door leaving me alone with the storm and my thoughts. I settled into bed, listening to the rain and wind outside my window, occasionally illuminated by distant lightning. Sleep seemed impossible with my mind replaying the evening, the almost moment during the movie, the quiet conversation by candlelight, the way Evan had looked at me before we parted for the night. I must have eventually drifted off, because the next thing I knew, I was waking to a particularly loud thunderclap that seemed to shake the entire building. My room was still dark, power evidently still out, but there was enough ambient light from the storm for me to make out the shapes of my furniture. As my eyes adjusted, I became aware of a sound beyond the rain, my bedroom door slowly opening. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint emergency lights in the hallway. "Evan?" I whispered, propping myself up on one elbow. "Sorry," came his quiet voice. "Did I wake you?" "No, the thunder did." I squinted, trying to make out his expression in the darkness. Everything okay? He hesitated, one hand still on my doorknob. Yeah, I just... He trailed off, then let out a soft, embarrassed laugh. This is stupid. I'll go back. No, I said too quickly. What is it? Another pause, longer this time. I couldn't sleep. The storm. You know I've never liked them. I did know. I remembered his admission months ago, the way he'd tried to laugh it off as a childhood fear he'd mostly outgrown. I remembered thinking it was endearing, this confident, seemingly fearless person having such a human vulnerability. Do you want to come in? I offered, my heart beginning to race. He took a step forward, then stopped again. I don't want to bother you. You're not bothering me. In the dim light, I saw him nod once before closing the door behind him and approaching my bed with hesitant steps. I moved over automatically, making space, and after a moment's pause, he slid under the covers beside me. The twin bed was not designed for two adults. There was no way to avoid contact, no way to pretend this was just casual roommate behavior. His body radiated heat even through the layers of blankets and clothing between us. Thanks, he murmured, his voice closer now. Sorry for being weird. It's not weird, I assured him, though we both knew it was. In 8 months of living together, we'd never crossed this particular boundary. Everyone's afraid of something. What are you afraid of? He asked, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it over the rain. This, I thought, but didn't say. This moment. What happens next? How much I want you? Lots of things, I said instead. Failure. Never finishing my book. Disappointing people. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating his face beside me on the pillow, eyes wide and searching, lips slightly parted. When darkness fell again, I felt rather than saw him shift closer. Can I stay here just for tonight? He whispered, and I could feel his breath warm against my face. Yes, I managed to say, though my voice didn't sound like my own. There was movement in the darkness, and then I felt it. His forehead gently pressing against mine, our faces close enough that our noses almost touched. He exhaled shakily, and I felt his hand cautiously find my waist over the blanket. Noah, he breathed, my name a question and an answer all at once. And then another flash of lightning, the world suspended in brilliant clarity for one heartbeat before plunging back into darkness. The lightning faded, but the electricity between us remained, tangible, terrifying, transformative. For a long moment, neither of us moved. We lay there, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air, suspended in that fragile space between what we had been and what we might become. I felt Evan's hand tremble slightly where it rested against my waist. In the darkness, I couldn't see his expression, but I could feel his uncertainty mirroring my own. This was the precipice. One move forward would change everything. One move back would pretend nothing had. The thunder rolled again, more distant now. The storm was passing, but something else was brewing in its place. We should sleep, Evan finally whispered, his voice unsteady, but not moving away. It's late. Yeah, I agreed, though sleep felt impossible with my heart hammering against my ribs. Neither of us moved. His forehead remained pressed against mine, his hand still on my waist. I could feel his breath, warm and slightly uneven, against my lips. All I would need to do was tilt my chin forward, just an inch, and everything would change. I didn't, he didn't. Eventually, exhaustion overcame adrenaline, and I drifted into sleep with Evan's warmth beside me, close but not touching except for that point of connection between our foreheads, like a promise neither of us was ready to make. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through my blinds and an empty space beside me. The sheets still held the impression of Evan's body, the pillow still carried the faint scent of his shampoo, but he was gone. For a disorienting moment, I wondered if I had dreamed the entire encounter. The storm, his silhouette in my doorway, the warmth of his skin near mine. But the indent in the mattress was real. Whatever had happened, or hadn't happened, between us was real. I pulled myself out of bed, running a hand through my sleep-mussed hair. The apartment was quiet, but I could smell coffee brewing. Evan was still home. I considered staying in my room, avoiding whatever awkwardness surely awaited in our kitchen. But hiding wouldn't solve anything, and the need for caffeine eventually outweighed my apprehension. When I finally emerged, Evan was standing by the window, coffee mug in hand, staring out at the rain-washed city. He turned at the sound of my footsteps, and our eyes met briefly before we both looked away. "Power's back," he said unnecessarily, gesturing vaguely toward the functioning lights. "Good," I replied, moving to the coffee pot. "That's good." The silence that followed was heavier than any we'd shared before. I poured coffee into my mug, acutely aware of Evan's presence behind me, the careful distance he maintained. When I turned, he had moved to the table and was now seated, eyes fixed on his mug. I joined him, sitting across rather than beside him, as I might have done before. We sipped our coffee without speaking, the only sounds the occasional car passing on the wet street below and the soft ticking of the clock on our wall. "Did you sleep okay?" he finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yeah," I lied. "You?" he nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "Thanks for, letting me crash there." "Anytime," I said, then immediately regretted the implication. "I mean, I know what you meant," he cut in quickly. "Just, thanks." Another silence descended, this one stretching painfully between us. There was so much I wanted to say, so many questions I wanted to ask. Why did you come to my room? What did it mean when you pressed your forehead to mine? Do you feel this too, whatever this is? Instead, I asked, "Do you want some breakfast? I could make eggs." "Actually, I have to head out soon. Promise to help Michael move some furniture." Evan stood, carrying his mug to the sink. "Rain check?" I nodded, ignoring the twist of disappointment in my chest at the mention of Michael's name. Evan had been spending more time with him lately, a friend from his running group who had recently moved to our area. Or at least, I assumed they were just friends. Evan had never explicitly said otherwise. "Sure," I said, "another time." He lingered by the sink a moment too long, as if wanting to say something more. Then he straightened his shoulders and offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'll be back later this afternoon," he said, already moving toward his room. "Don't wait up if you have plans." I didn't have plans. I never had plans when there was a chance of spending time with Evan instead. But I just nodded and watched him retreat, wondering how two people who'd been so close just hours ago could feel like strangers in the morning light. The apartment felt too empty after Evan left. I tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. My protagonist's emotional journey suddenly felt too close to my own, too raw to translate into fiction. Instead, I found myself cleaning, an activity I usually avoided, but which now provided the mindless distraction I needed. By early afternoon, the apartment was spotless, and I had nothing left to occupy my hands or mind. I was contemplating a walk, despite the lingering drizzle outside, when my phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Emergency coffee intervention needed. The guy from Tinder turned out to be married. Meet at Joe's in 30? I texted back immediately, grateful for the escape. On my way. The coffee shop was crowded with people seeking refuge from the damp weather, but Lily had snagged our usual corner table. She waved as I entered, her bright red hair unmistakable even in the packed room. "You're a lifesaver," she declared as I sat down. "I ordered you that caramel thing you like, with extra whipped cream, because we both deserve it after the week I've had." I smiled, accepting the oversized mug she pushed toward me. "That bad, huh?" "Worse." She launched into the story of her latest dating disaster, and I let myself be carried along by her animated retelling, grateful for the distraction from my own romantic confusion. It wasn't until she'd exhausted the topic of her Tinder catastrophe that she fixed me with a scrutinizing look. "Okay, what's going on with you? You've got that broody writer face." "I don't have a broody writer face," I protested. "You absolutely do. It's this hole." She gestured vaguely at my expression. Furrowed brow, distant eyes, slightly pouty thing. Very artistic. Very concerning. "Spill." I hesitated, unsure how to articulate what had happened, what was happening with Evan. Lily knew him, of course, had met him several times when she came over to the apartment, had even once, after a few too many glasses of wine, whispered that she thought he might have a thing for me. I dismissed her observation then. Now I wasn't so sure. It's complicated, I finally said. The best stories always are. She leaned forward, dropping her voice. Is it about your hot roommate? I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Why would you? Noah, please. She rolled her eyes. I've witnessed the way you two orbit each other like lovesick planets. Something's been brewing there for months. I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Had it been that obvious to everyone but me? He climbed into my bed last night, I blurted out, then immediately felt my face heat. Not like that. There was a storm. He couldn't sleep. He just needed company. Lily's eyebrows shot up. Okay, wow. And nothing. We slept. He was gone when I woke up. We had the most awkward breakfast of all time, and then he left to help another friend move furniture. Another friend? Or another friend? She asked, making air quotes around the second friend. I shrugged uncomfortably. I don't know. His name is Michael. They run together. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. And how do you feel about this bed-sharing development? The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. How did I feel? Confused, hopeful, terrified. Like something precious and fragile had been placed in my hands, and I had no idea if I should hold tight or let go. I don't know, I admitted. I think I've had feelings for him for a while, but I don't know what last night meant to him. If it meant anything at all. Have you considered, I don't know, asking him? Lily suggested, in the tone one might use to explain a particularly obvious concept to a child. We don't talk about things like that. Maybe you should start. I shook my head, staring into my coffee. What if I'm reading too much into it? What if he just needed comfort during the storm and now he regrets it? What if I say something and make everything weird? Hate to break it to you, but it's already weird, Lily pointed out. You shared a bed. You're dancing around each other like awkward penguins. The only way out is through. She made it sound so simple. Just talk to him. But the thought of putting my feelings into words, of making myself that vulnerable, made my stomach twist with anxiety. I'll think about it, I promised, knowing I probably wouldn't. Lily sighed, recognizing my evasion, but letting it slide. Fine, but don't come crying to me in 6 months when you're still pining silently, and he's dating runner Michael because you never spoke up. The image she painted was so painfully plausible that I winced. Can we talk about something else now? Please? She obliged, launching into a story about her latest work drama, but her words had planted themselves firmly in my mind. Was that where this was heading? Would I spend months or years watching Evan from a distance, gathering moments like souvenirs, but never reaching for what I really wanted? The thought followed me all the way home, a shadow I couldn't shake even as the clouds finally parted and weak sunlight broke through. Evan wasn't home when I returned to the apartment. I tried not to check the time too often, tried not to wonder where he was or who he was with. Instead, I forced myself to open my laptop and write, channeling my emotional turbulence into my protagonist's journey. I was deep in a scene, my character finally confronting his best friend about the distance growing between them, when I heard the apartment door open. I glanced at the clock, 7:23 p.m. Later than Evan had implied he'd be back. Noah, his voice called from the entryway. In my room, I called back, saving my document before closing my laptop. There was a pause, then footsteps approaching. Evan appeared in my doorway, looking slightly windblown and carrying a paper bag that smelled tantalizingly of garlic and spices. Hey, he said, holding up the bag. I brought Thai food. Peace offering for bailing on breakfast. The gesture was so normal, so like our usual routine, that I felt something tight in my chest begin to loosen. Maybe we could find our way back to comfortable. Maybe last night didn't have to change everything. Peace accepted, I said, setting my laptop aside. Especially if that's pad thai in there. 2 orders, extra peanuts on yours. He smiled, and for the first time that day, it reached his eyes. Dining room or couch? Couch, I decided, following him out to our living room. We settled into our usual spots, the familiar ritual of unpacking takeout containers and passing utensils easing some of the tension between us. Evan turned on the TV to a cooking competition we both liked to mock, and for a while, it was almost like before. Comfortable silence interspersed with commentary on the contestants' dubious culinary choices. How was the furniture moving? I asked during a commercial break, trying to sound casual. Fine. Michael's place is a 4th-floor walk-up, so my calves hate me right now, but we got everything in. Evan twirled noodles around his fork. How was your day? Quiet. Met Lily for coffee. She had another dating disaster to report. Evan chuckled. That girl needs better screening criteria. What was wrong with this one? Married. Yikes. Another silence fell, this one less comfortable than before, filled with all the things we weren't saying. I focused on my food, acutely aware of Evan beside me, close but not touching, careful in a way he'd never been before last night. Noah, he began suddenly, setting his container down. I think we should... My phone rang, cutting him off. Lily's name flashed on the screen, and I hesitated, torn between answering and hearing what Evan had been about to say. It's Lily, I said apologetically. She might be having a crisis. Do you mind if I... No, go ahead. Evan waved a hand, turning back to the TV. Not important. But his tone suggested otherwise, and I felt a pang of regret as I answered the call. Lily, everything okay? Not even remotely. Married guy just showed up at my apartment with flowers and a sob story about how his marriage is technically over, and I need you to be ready to call the cops if he doesn't leave. I stood, moving toward the kitchen for some privacy. Are you safe? Do you want me to come over? I'm fine for now. He's still in the hallway. I haven't opened the door. Just stay on the phone with me while I tell him to fuck off? Of course. The call lasted almost 20 minutes, during which I paced our small kitchen, occasionally peeking out to where Evan still sat on the couch, seemingly absorbed in the cooking show. By the time Lily confirmed married guy had finally left her building, our dinner had gone cold, and the moment of potential conversation with Evan had evaporated. Crisis averted, I said, returning to the couch. Sorry about that. No problem. Evan's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. Everything okay? Yeah, just Lily's Tinder nightmare showing up at her apartment. He's gone now. Evan nodded, gathering our containers. I should probably turn in anyway. Early shift tomorrow. And just like that, whatever opening had briefly appeared between us closed again. I watched him clean up, offering to help, but being gently waved off. At his bedroom door, he paused and looked back at me, something unreadable in his expression. Good night, Noah. Good night, I echoed, left alone with the distinct feeling that I'd missed something important. 3 days passed in a similar pattern. We moved around each other carefully, conversations kept light and brief, physical contact studiously avoided. Evan picked up extra shifts at the bookstore. I spent more time at coffee shops or the library, writing. The apartment became a place we occupied in shifts rather than together. On Wednesday afternoon, I was returning from a grocery run, arms laden with bags, when I nearly collided with Evan in the narrow hallway outside our door. He was leaving just as I was arriving, and for a moment we did an awkward dance, trying to navigate around each other in the confined space. Sorry, I mumbled, pressing myself against the wall to let him pass. No, my fault, he countered, reaching to take one of my grocery bags. Let me help you. Our fingers brushed as he took the bag, a momentary point of contact that shouldn't have felt significant, but somehow was. We both froze, eyes meeting for what felt like the first time in days. Thanks, I managed, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. He nodded, his gaze dropping to where our hands had touched before quickly looking away. Together, we entered the apartment, and he set the bag on the counter with careful precision. "I was just heading out for a run," he said, fingers tapping restlessly against his thigh. "But I can help put these away first if you want." "No, it's fine," I assured him. "Go ahead." He hesitated, and for a moment I thought he might stay anyway. But then he nodded, moving toward the door. "Evan!" I called impulsively as his hand touched the doorknob. He turned, expression open and oddly vulnerable. "Yeah? I miss you. What happened to us? What was that night? What were you going to say before Lily called?" But the words stuck in my throat, caught behind the fear of saying too much, of pushing too far. So instead I said, "Nothing. Just have a good run." Something like disappointment flickered across his face before he masked it with a smile. "Thanks. See you later." The door closed behind him, and I leaned against the counter, exhaling shakily. That moment in the hallway, the brief touch of his fingers against mine, the way his eyes had held mine, had felt more intimate than the entirety of the past 3 days combined. Lily was right. We couldn't go on like this, orbiting each other without ever connecting. Something needed to change. I just wasn't sure I had the courage to be the one to change it. That evening, I was standing on our small rooftop patio, really just a converted fire escape with 2 plastic chairs and a collection of Evan's struggling potted herbs, when I heard the access door open behind me. I didn't turn, but I recognized Evan's footsteps, the particular way the metal grating creaked beneath his weight. "Thought I might find you up here," he said, coming to stand beside me at the railing. "Mind some company?" I shook my head, making room for him. The sunset was turning the sky a remarkable shade of orange-pink, the clouds edged in gold. Below us, the city was settling into evening rhythms, lights coming on in windows, people returning from work, the distant hum of traffic. "Brought refreshments," Evan said, holding up 2 bottles of beer. "Seemed to like that kind of night." I accepted one gratefully, our fingers carefully not touching during the exchange. We stood in silence for a while, sipping our beers and watching the sunset deepen into dusk. "I've missed this," Evan finally said, his voice quiet beneath the ambient city noise. "The roof?" I asked, though I knew that wasn't what he meant. He gave me a sideways look. "Us, just being together without it being weird." I nodded, throat tight. "Yeah, me too." More silence, but this one less strained than before. The first stars were becoming visible above us as darkness gradually replaced the sunset's glow. "Noah," Evan began, then stopped, taking a long sip of his beer. "I wanted to... about the other night." My heart began to race. "What about it?" He turned to face me fully then, his expression serious in the fading light. "I can't stop thinking about that night." The words hung between us, weighted with all the things we'd been avoiding saying. I gripped the railing tighter, afraid to speak, afraid to break whatever fragile moment this was. "I shouldn't have left like that in the morning," he continued when I didn't respond. I woke up and you were there and I panicked." "Why?" I finally asked. He looked down at the bottle in his hands. "Because I was afraid I'd crossed a line, that I'd made things weird between us, that you'd regret letting me stay." "I didn't regret it," I said softly. His eyes found mine again, searching. "No?" I shook my head, gathering courage. "I regretted that you left before we could talk about it." A small, wry smile tugged at his lips. "And yet, neither of us has actually talked about it for days." "We're not very good at this, are we?" I offered a tentative smile in return. "Terrible," he agreed, his smile widening briefly before fading into something more serious. "So, let's talk about it now. What happened that night? What did it mean to you?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. After days of avoidance and careful distance, the sudden shift to honesty was disorienting. But it was also a relief, like a window finally opened in a too stuffy room. It meant... I paused, searching for words that wouldn't reveal too much but wouldn't be dishonest either. It meant I realized something might be changing between us, that maybe what I've been feeling isn't just on my side. Evan went very still, his eyes never leaving mine. "What have you been feeling, Noah?" This was it, the precipice again. But this time, in the gentle evening air above the city we both loved, with stars emerging overhead and the soft buffer of twilight around us, it didn't feel quite so terrifying to take the leap. "More than friendship," I admitted quietly, "for a while now." The confession lingered between us, vulnerable and raw. I waited, heart hammering, for his response. For a moment, Evan just looked at me, an unreadable expression on his face. Then he set his beer down on the small table between our chairs and took a step closer. "Me too," he said simply. Two small words, but they shifted the entire world beneath my feet. "Really?" He nodded, a mixture of vulnerability and certainty in his expression. "I think maybe I've been fighting it, trying to keep things simple, safe." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen 100 times before, but now watched with new significance. "But that night, during the storm, I wasn't really afraid of the thunder, Noah. I just wanted to be close to you." The admission hung between us, honest and exposed beneath the darkening sky. I set my own beer down, turning to face him fully. "So where does that leave us?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've never felt like this about a friend before. I don't want to mess us up. You're too important." I understood his fear because I shared it. The risk of transforming what we had into something else, something unknown, was terrifying. But the alternative, continuing to orbit each other without ever connecting, suddenly seemed more frightening still. "Maybe we just see where it goes," I suggested. "No pressure, no expectations, just us figuring it out together." Evan's expression softened, relief evident in the relaxing of his shoulders. "I'd like that." We stayed on the roof until the stars fully emerged, talking not about what might happen between us, but about ordinary things. His day at the bookstore, the progress on my novel, a film we both wanted to see. But there was a new undercurrent to our conversation, an awareness that hadn't been there before. Occasionally, our eyes would meet and hold a moment too long. Once, Evan's hand brushed mine as we both reached for our beers, and neither of us pulled away immediately. It was a beginning. Tentative and uncertain, but real. The next day, I came home to find Evan sorting laundry in our small utility room, a narrow space off the kitchen barely big enough for the stacked washer and dryer and a small folding table. He looked up as I appeared in the doorway, a smile spreading across his face that made my heart stutter. "Hey," he greeted me. "I was about to start a load. Want to add anything?" "I should probably do mine too," I said, moving to fetch my hamper from my room. A few minutes later, we were crowded together in the tiny space, sorting clothes into piles. The domesticity of it struck me suddenly. How many times we'd done this exact task together, shoulders occasionally bumping in the confined area, discussing weekend plans or complaining about work as we separated whites from colors. But now, after our rooftop conversation, the routine felt different, charged with new awareness. "How was your day?" Evan asked, tossing a sock into the white pile. "Good." "Productive. I think I finally worked out the ending of my book." I hesitated, then added, "Actually, I was wondering if you might want to read the new chapter sometime, if you're still interested." He looked up, genuinely surprised. "Really? You'd let me read it?" I nodded, feeling unexpectedly shy. "It's important to me. Your opinion, I mean." Something in his expression softened. "I'd love to read it, whenever you're ready to share it." We continued sorting in companionable silence for a while. I was acutely aware of our proximity in the small space, the occasional brush of his arm against mine as we worked. It was both familiar and entirely new, this dance we'd been doing for months now recontextualized by our admissions the night before. "Do you need these washed?" Evan suddenly asked, holding up a navy blue hoodie that I recognized as his own. "That's yours," I pointed out. "You left it in my room a few weeks ago. I kept forgetting to return it." "Oh." He looked at the garment with a peculiar expression. Have you been wearing it? The question caught me off guard. Had I been wearing it? Yes, occasionally on chilly mornings when I padded to the kitchen for coffee, or in the evenings when I was writing and the apartment grew cool. There was something comforting about the soft fabric that still faintly smelled of his laundry detergent. Sometimes, I admitted, feeling oddly exposed by the confession. Evan's eyes met mine, something warm and wondering in his gaze. Keep it, he said quietly. It looks better on you anyway. The simple statement shouldn't have felt so intimate, but it did. Like a gift, a concession, a step over a line we'd been careful not to cross. Thanks, I murmured, taking the hoodie back and setting it aside. We finished sorting the laundry, loaded the washer, and I turned to leave, assuming the moment was over. But as I moved toward the door, Evan reached out, his fingers catching my wrist gently. Noah, he said, his voice low and slightly unsteady. Wait! I turned back, suddenly very aware of how close we were in the confined space, how his hand felt against my skin. Yeah? My own voice sounded strange to my ears. Evan seemed to struggle with what he wanted to say, brow furrowed slightly. Then, instead of speaking, he slowly, so slowly I could have easily stepped away, moved his hand from my wrist to lace his fingers with mine. The simple contact, fingers interwoven, hit me with unexpected force. We'd touched before, casual brushes and bumps, but never this, deliberate, intentional, unmistakably affectionate. Is this okay? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We stood there in our tiny laundry room, surrounded by the prosaic reality of sorting clothes, holding hands, like it was both the most natural and the most extraordinary thing in the world. I don't know what I'm doing, Evan admitted after a moment, his thumb rubbing gently across the back of my hand. This is all new to me, but I know I want this, whatever this is. The vulnerability in his admission broke something open inside me, a dam holding back all the words and feelings I'd been careful to contain. I've wanted this for so long, I confessed, the words rushing out before I could reconsider them. Being around you every day, living with you, being your friend but wanting more. It's been hard, he supplied when I trailed off. Beautiful, I corrected, and hard. Both. His expression softened, and he squeezed my hand gently. I think I've been feeling it too, for a while. I just didn't know what to do with it, how to understand it. And now, I asked, hardly daring to breathe. Now I'm standing in our laundry room, holding your hand, wondering why it took a thunderstorm for me to finally be brave enough to do this. He smiled, that familiar smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, but now directed at me with a warmth that made my chest ache. And then, with the washer humming beside us and the scent of laundry detergent in the air, he leaned forward slightly, a question in his eyes. I answered by closing the distance between us. Our first kiss was gentle, tentative, questioning. Careful, his lips were soft against mine, slightly chapped from the spring wind. He tasted faintly of coffee and mint, and his free hand came up to rest lightly on my waist, as if afraid pressing too hard might break the moment. When we pulled apart, his eyes remained closed for a heartbeat longer, and the expression on his face when he opened them, wonder, relief, happiness, mirrored exactly what I was feeling. That was, he began. Yeah, I agreed, unable to stop a smile from spreading across my face. He laughed softly, pressing his forehead against mine in an echo of that night during the storm. We should have done that a long time ago. We're doing it now, I pointed out, squeezing his hand still entwined with mine. The washer beeped, startling us both and breaking the moment. Evan chuckled, reluctantly pulling back. To be continued? He asked, eyes still fixed on mine. Definitely, I promised. That evening, we ordered pizza and watched a movie on the couch like we'd done countless times before. But everything was different now. Evan sat close beside me, our thighs pressed together, his arm draped casually along the back of the couch behind my shoulders. Occasionally, his fingers would play with the hair at the nape of my neck, the gentle touch sending shivers down my spine. Neither of us was really watching the film. Instead, we existed in a state of hyper-awareness, Each small movement, each casual touch now loaded with new meaning. Halfway through, Evan's hand found mine, fingers intertwining with a naturalness that belied how monumental the simple gesture felt. "This is nice," he murmured, his mouth close to my ear. I turned toward him, our faces now inches apart. "Yeah, it is." His eyes dropped to my lips, and then he was kissing me again, still gentle but with more confidence than before. My hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat quicken beneath my palm. The movie played on, forgotten, as we explored this new dimension of our relationship with slow, unhurried kisses that gradually deepened. When we finally pulled apart, Evan's eyes were dark, his breathing slightly uneven. "I should probably warn you," he said, voice husky, "that if we keep doing that, I'm not going to care about how this movie ends." "I don't even remember what we're watching," I admitted, making him laugh. He pulled me closer, arm now fully around my shoulders, and I leaned into him, my head resting against his chest. His fingers traced patterns on my arm, and I felt his lips press briefly against my hair. "Noah," he said after a while, his voice vibrating in his chest beneath my ear. "I want you to know, this isn't casual for me. Whatever happens between us, however we define it, it matters. You matter." I tilted my head up to look at him, finding his expression serious and open. "It matters to me too," I assured him. "You've always mattered." His smile then was soft, private, a smile I'd never seen before but instantly wanted to see again and again. He pressed another kiss to my forehead, and we settled back to pretend to watch the remainder of the film, content for now to simply be together in this new way. No rush to define or label what we were becoming. The next week passed in a dizzying blend of familiar routines overlaid with new dynamics. We still cooked together in our small kitchen, but now Evan would stand behind me, arms around my waist as I stirred sauce on the stove. We still watched movies on the couch, but now we ended up horizontal more often than not, trading lazy kisses until we lost track of time. At night, we still retreated to our separate bedrooms, a boundary neither of us seemed ready to cross yet, despite the growing intensity of our physical connection. There was an unspoken agreement to take things slowly, to give ourselves time to adjust to this transformation in our relationship. On Friday evening, I was writing in my bedroom when Evan knocked softly on my door. He looked slightly nervous when I called for him to enter, hands shoved in his pockets in a way that immediately put me on alert. "Everything okay?" I asked, setting my laptop aside. "Yeah, I just..." He hesitated, then blurted out, "Michael invited us to a party tomorrow night. At his place." I blinked, surprised by both the invitation and Evan's apparent anxiety about it. "Us? As in both of us?" Evan nodded, coming to sit on the edge of my bed. "I told him about us, or whatever us is." "Oh." I wasn't sure how to feel about that. On one hand, it was a declaration of sorts. Evan acknowledging to others that something had changed between us. On the other hand, we ourselves had carefully avoided putting labels on what was happening. "What did you tell him exactly?" Evan looked down at his hands. "That we're figuring things out. That it's new but important." A warm feeling spread through my chest at his words. "And he invited us to his party." "Yeah, he said he's been telling me to make a move for months." Evan laughed softly, finally meeting my eyes. "Apparently, I wasn't as subtle as I thought." "Months?" I echoed, processing this new information. "You talked to Michael about me before?" Evan's cheeks colored slightly. "He's kind of been my sounding board, especially after the night of the storm. I was confused, and he's been in a similar situation before, so..." The realization that Evan had been confiding in someone else about his feelings for me, feelings that predated our recent shift, was both surprising and oddly moving. "So Michael's not..." I began, then stopped, embarrassed. Evan's expression cleared as he understood my implication. "No, God no, he's just a friend, a good one, who has apparently been tired of hearing me talk about you without doing anything about it." Relief washed through me, followed by a flutter of happiness at the thought of Evan talking about me to others, thinking about me when we weren't together. So, the party? Evan prompted when I didn't immediately respond. We don't have to go if it would be weird. I know we haven't really defined what this is yet, and being around other people might. I'd like to go. I interrupted his nervous rambling. With you. His face brightened. Yeah? I nodded, reaching for his hand. Yeah, I want to meet your friends, as whatever we are. Evan's smile was radiant as he interlaced his fingers with mine. Whatever we are. He repeated softly, leaning in to brush a kiss against my lips. The party wasn't what I expected. Rather than the crowded, chaotic gathering I'd been mentally preparing for, Michael's apartment held only about 15 people. Ambient music playing at a volume that still allowed for conversation, and no red Solo cups in sight. Instead, an impromptu cocktail bar had been set up in the kitchen. Michael himself was a surprise too. Tall and lanky with glasses and an easy smile, he greeted me warmly when Evan introduced us. Finally, he said, shaking my hand. I was beginning to think you were imaginary, given how much this one talks about you. He jabbed a thumb toward Evan, who looked adorably embarrassed. Shut up, Mike, Evan muttered, but his hand found the small of my back, a gentle point of contact that kept me grounded in the unfamiliar social setting. Never, Michael grinned. I've years of material to embarrass him with, Noah. Find me later when he's not hovering, and I'll share all the best stories. Evan groaned, but he was smiling as he steered me toward the makeshift bar. Ignore him. He thinks he's funny. Throughout the evening, I watched Evan in this new context, among his friends, in a space that wasn't ours. He was relaxed and confident, slightly more outgoing than he was at home, but his attention constantly returned to me. A glance across the room to make sure I was comfortable, his hand finding mine when we stood together, the way he'd include me in conversations, drawing me in when I might have otherwise hung back. And most telling of all, the complete absence of anxiety or hesitation when he introduced me to others. No awkward pauses, where he might have stumbled over defining who I was to him. Just my name, offered with a warmth and pride that made something bloom in my chest. Later, as we shared space on an oversized armchair in the corner, Evan leaned close to my ear. How are you doing? Ready to leave or okay for a bit longer? The consideration in the question, his awareness of my more introverted nature, filled me with affection. I'm good, I assured him. Your friends are nice. They like you, he said, arm draped casually around my shoulders. Michael especially, which is good because he's my best friend besides you. The casual classification should have been obvious. Of course I was Evan's best friend, regardless of what else we were becoming. But hearing it spoken aloud filled me with a peculiar joy. He seems great, I said sincerely, and he makes a surprisingly good old-fashioned for a guy with dinosaur figurines on his bookshelves. Evan laughed, the sound warm against my ear. Don't let the dinosaurs fool you. Mike's secretly sophisticated. He just hides it well. Across the room, I caught Michael watching us with an approving smile. He raised his glass slightly when our eyes met, a subtle toast that felt like acceptance, like welcome. Later that night, walking home with Evan's hand in mine through quiet streets, I felt a sense of expansion. Like our relationship, previously contained within the walls of our apartment, was now extending outward into the broader world. Each step we took together felt significant somehow. A declaration without words. I had a good time tonight, I said, as we approached our building. Evan squeezed my hand. Me too. It was nice to not have to pretend I don't want to be near you all the time. The simple honesty of the statement caught me off guard. Is that how it felt before? Like you were pretending? He considered this as we climbed the stairs to our floor. Not exactly, more like carefully hiding part of myself. Being close to you but holding something back. He glanced at me as we reached our door. I don't want to hold back anymore. The quiet intensity in his voice sent a shiver through me. Inside our apartment, with the door closed behind us, Evan tugged gently on my hand, pulling me to him. His kiss was different than those we'd shared before, deeper, more certain, edged with a hunger that had been only hinted at previously. When we broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. Stay with me tonight, he whispered. Just to sleep, he added quickly. I want to wake up next to you this time. The request, so simple and yet so profound, made my heart ache with tenderness. Yes, I said softly. I'd like that. Later, lying in Evan's bed facing each other in the darkness, his features barely visible in the faint light filtering through his blinds, I felt a sense of completion, a circle closing from that night during the storm to this moment. What are you thinking about? He murmured, his hand resting warm against my waist. That night, I admitted. During the storm, when you came to my room. He hummed softly in acknowledgement. I was so nervous. Spent about 10 minutes standing outside your door before I worked up the courage to turn the handle. Really? The image of him hesitating, uncertain, was endearing and surprising. I thought you were just acting on impulse. No, his fingers traced idle patterns against my side. I'd been thinking about it for a while. How it would feel to be close to you like that. The storm just gave me an excuse. A reason that wasn't admitting everything I was feeling. I reached up to touch his face, thumb brushing along his cheekbone. And now? No storm tonight. He turned his head slightly to press a kiss against my palm. Don't need an excuse anymore. His eyes held mine in the darkness, serious and certain. If I climb into your bed again, it won't be because I had a nightmare. The words hung between us, a promise and an invitation. I moved closer, eliminating the small space that remained between us, my hand sliding to the nape of his neck. I'm counting on it, I whispered against his lips. He was smiling as he kissed me, and I felt my own smile rising to meet his. Two people who had orbited each other for so long, finally allowing their paths to converge. Uncertain of the destination, but certain, at least, that they wanted to travel there together. He was always beside me. Now I wanted him to choose to stay. And in the quiet darkness of his room, his arms around me and his heartbeat steady beneath my palm, it felt like maybe he already had. Morning arrived with gentle persistence. Sunlight filtering through blinds neither of us had remembered to close. The distant sounds of the city already awake beyond our windows. I opened my eyes to find Evan watching me, his expression soft with something I was only now learning to recognize without fear. You stayed, I murmured, voice still rough with sleep. His smile was slow, slightly crooked. Of course I stayed. It's my bed. I laughed quietly, the sound muffled against the pillow we were sharing. Fair point. And, he continued, his hand finding mine beneath the covers. I wanted to be here when you woke up this time. The simple admission warmed me more than the sunlight streaming across the bed. We lay there for a while, facing each other in comfortable silence, fingers intertwined and eyes speaking volumes that words couldn't yet fully express. What happens now? I finally asked, the question encompassing far more than just our morning plans. Evan's thumb traced gentle circles against my palm. Coffee, he said decisively. Then maybe pancakes. Beyond that... He shrugged one shoulder, the movement shifting the sheets between us. We figure it out together, day by day. There was wisdom in his approach, this careful balance of certainty about the immediate and openness about all that would follow. I squeezed his hand in silent agreement. I like that plan, I said. He leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead, before reluctantly pulling away. I'll start the coffee. I watched him rise from the bed, admiring the easy grace of his movements as he pulled on a t-shirt and stretched, morning light catching the edges of his profile. He glanced back, catching me watching, and his smile turned playful. Enjoying the view? Heat rose to my cheeks, but I didn't look away. Very much. His quiet laugh followed him out of the room, and I lay there a moment longer, marveling at how different this morning felt from that first awkward one after the storm. How different I felt, no longer afraid of what might be visible in my eyes when I looked at him. In the kitchen, I found Evan at the stove, attempting to flip pancakes with more enthusiasm than skill. I came up behind him, tentatively slipping my arms around his waist, and felt him lean back into me with a contented sigh. This is nice, he said, covering one of my hands with his own, having permission to touch you whenever I want. Permission granted indefinitely. I murmured against his shoulder. He turned in my arms, abandoning the pancakes momentarily to kiss me properly. A slow, thorough good morning that left me slightly breathless. "Coffee's ready," he said when we finally separated, looking pleased with the dazed expression I could feel on my face. "Pancakes are burning," I pointed out. His eyes widened comically as he spun back to the stove. "Shit!" The moment was ordinary in its domesticity. Burnt pancakes, coffee in mismatched mugs, morning light spilling across our small kitchen table. But it felt monumental in its newness. This was still us, still the rhythm of shared space we'd perfected over months, but now with layers of meaning that transformed every interaction. "What are you thinking about?" Evan asked, watching me over the rim of his mug. "You've got that writer look, like you're narrating something in your head." I smiled, caught. "Just observing how this feels both exactly the same and completely different." He nodded, understanding immediately. "Like we've been rehearsing for this without realizing it." "Yes," I agreed, surprised by the aptness of his metaphor. "Exactly like that." "Maybe we have been," he mused. "Maybe all these months of living together, learning each other's habits, finding our rhythm. Maybe it was all leading here." The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating, that perhaps some part of us had always been moving toward this transformation, even when we weren't conscious of it. "Do you regret waiting so long?" I asked, suddenly curious. Evan considered this, head tilted thoughtfully. "No," he finally said. "I think we needed the time to build the foundation first. If this had happened right away," he shook his head, "I don't think I would have understood what it meant. What you mean to me." His words settled in my chest like something precious. I reached across the table to take his hand, a gesture that was quickly becoming habitual. "So what's on your agenda today?" he asked, changing the subject to lighter territory. "Writing," I said. "I'm close to finishing the first draft, just a few more chapters." "The ending you figured out?" His expression was genuinely interested. "The one you mentioned before?" I nodded. "It's coming together, more hopeful than I originally planned." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I wonder why." The teasing note in his voice made me laugh. "Shut up." "Make me," he challenged, eyes bright with mischief. So I did, leaning across our small table to kiss the smug smile from his lips, marveling at how easily we'd slipped into this new language between us, how natural it already felt. The weeks that followed were a gradual process of redefinition, learning the boundaries and dimensions of what we were becoming together. Some days it felt effortless, an organic extension of the friendship that had always existed between us. Other days brought moments of uncertainty, of stumbling as we navigated this new territory. There were small discoveries, how Evan liked to hold hands while walking, but preferred his arm around my shoulders when sitting together. How he closed his eyes when he was deeply affected by something I said. How he would sometimes watch me write with an expression of such focused attention that I could feel it like a physical touch. There were larger revelations too, his insecurity about the future, his complicated relationship with his father, the depth of his capacity for tenderness when he thought no one was looking. And there were challenges. Our first real argument, sparked by a misunderstanding about plans with friends, that left us both retreating to separate corners of the apartment before Evan finally came to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and said simply, "I don't want to fight with you." "I don't want to fight with you either," I'd replied, the tension of the evening dissolving as quickly as it had formed. "We're going to mess up sometimes," he'd said, taking my hand. "But I need you to know that even when I'm angry or frustrated, I still—" He'd paused, searching for words. "You're still the person I want to figure it out with." It wasn't quite an "I love you." Neither of us had said those words yet, but it carried the same weight, the same promise of commitment beyond the immediate. 1 month after that first morning waking up in Evan's bed, I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard the apartment door open. "Honey, I'm home," Evan called playfully, a greeting that had become something of a joke between us. He appeared in the kitchen doorway a moment later, slightly windblown from the spring breeze outside, holding a small potted plant. "What's that?" I asked, pausing in my vegetable chopping. A housewarming gift, he said, setting the terracotta pot on the counter. Or maybe a relationship-warming gift. I'm not sure what the protocol is. I looked at the plant, a small, healthy basil with bright green leaves, and then back at him, confusion evident in my expression. We've lived here for almost a year, and you already have an herb garden on the roof. True, he acknowledged, stepping closer until he could slip his arms around my waist. But this isn't for the apartment, it's for us. Something we're growing together. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was quintessentially Evan. Earnest and slightly cheesy in a way that never failed to warm me from the inside out. That's either the most romantic or the corniest thing you've ever said to me, I teased, setting down my knife to turn fully into his embrace. Why not both? He grinned, then more seriously. I realized today that it's been a month since everything changed. I hadn't been tracking the exact timeline, but hearing him say it, I recognized the significance of the milestone. A good month? The best, he said simply, no hesitation in his voice. I've been thinking. Dangerous, I murmured, but fell silent when I saw the seriousness in his eyes. I've been thinking that maybe we should stop pretending we still need separate bedrooms, he continued, unless you want your own space, which I completely understand. Evan, I interrupted his nervous qualification. Are you asking me to officially move into your room? He nodded, looking both certain and slightly vulnerable. Or I could move into yours. I'm not picky. I just want to go to sleep with you and wake up with you every day. Officially. The proposal was practical. We'd been spending most nights together anyway, alternating between our rooms with increasing frequency, but it felt momentous nonetheless. A deliberate step forward rather than the gradual drift we'd been allowing. I'd like that, I said, watching his expression brighten at my words. But your room has better morning light, and a bigger bed. Practicality wins, he laughed, pressing a quick kiss to my lips. So that's a yes? You'll be my officially official roommate plus boyfriend? It was the first time either of us had used that term, boyfriend, and hearing it sent a small thrill through me. Yes, I confirmed, to all of the above. He kissed me again, longer this time, until the vegetables and the symbolic basil plant were temporarily forgotten in favor of celebrating this new definition of us. The process of consolidating our living space into one bedroom was revealing in unexpected ways. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd scattered throughout the apartment, how many of my possessions had already migrated into Evan's space over the past weeks. Were you planning a gradual invasion all along? Evan teased, as we discovered yet another of my books on his nightstand, a pair of my socks in his drawer. Strategic infiltration, I countered, helping him move his dresser to make room for mine. You never even noticed. The merging of our spaces felt significant. My books alongside his on the shelves, my laptop finding a home on the desk we now shared, our clothes hanging together in the closet. Even the scent of the room was changing, becoming a blend of both of us. That night, lying in what was now officially our bed, I felt a profound sense of rightness settle over me. Evan was reading beside me, glasses perched on his nose, one hand absently stroking my arm as he turned pages with the other. What will you do with my old room? I asked, watching his profile in the warm light of the bedside lamp. He glanced over at me, marking his place with a finger. I was thinking a home gym, he said with mock seriousness, or maybe a sophisticated man cave with leather chairs and whiskey decanters. I laughed, poking his side. Be serious. Fine, he relented with a smile. Actually, I was thinking it might make a good writing space for you. More private than the kitchen table, somewhere you could close the door when you need to focus. The thoughtfulness of the suggestion touched me deeply. You'd give me the whole room just for writing. Of course, he said, as if it were obvious. Your book is important. You're important. He paused, then added more softly. I want to support your dreams, Noah, whatever they are. I looked at him, this man who had been my roommate, my friend, and now something so much more, and felt a swell of emotion so powerful it momentarily robbed me of speech. I love you, I said, the words I'd been feeling for weeks finally finding voice. Evan went very still, his book forgotten. For one terrible moment, I feared I'd said too much too soon. Then his expression softened into something so tender it almost hurt to witness. "I love you too," he replied, voice steady and certain. "So much it scares me sometimes." I understood exactly what he meant. The depth of what had grown between us was frightening in its intensity, its potential for both joy and pain. But as he set his book aside and gathered me into his arms, I knew with absolute clarity that the risk was worth the reward. "When did you know?" he asked later, after kisses had given way to quiet conversation in the darkness. "That I loved you? Or that I wanted more than friendship?" I clarified, my head resting on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Either, both." I considered the question seriously. "I think I started falling for you months ago. Maybe even from the beginning in some way. But I didn't let myself acknowledge it. It felt too complicated, too risky." I traced patterns on his skin, remembering. "There was a night last winter when you came home after running in the snow. Your cheeks were red, and your hair was damp, and you were so excited about something you'd seen. I don't even remember what, but you were practically glowing with it. And I remember thinking, oh, I could love him. And then immediately trying to forget I'd thought it." Evan's hand moved gently through my hair. "And now?" "Now I don't want to forget," I admitted. "I want to remember every moment I've loved you and every moment to come." He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "What about you?" I asked. "When did you know?" He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I think it was more gradual for me. Or maybe I was just more oblivious." His chest rumbled with soft laughter beneath my ear. "But there was a moment. You were reading something you'd written. Not to me. You were just editing at the kitchen table, reading aloud to yourself to check the flow. And I remember stopping in the hallway to listen, not wanting to interrupt you. You were so absorbed, so connected to the words. And I thought, I want someone to look at me the way he looks at what he loves. And then it hit me that sometimes, when you didn't think I noticed, you did look at me that way." The confession washed over me like warm water. "Why didn't you say anything then?" "Fear," he admitted simply. "Fear of being wrong, of ruining what we had, of not knowing how to be what you needed." I lifted my head to look at him in the dim light. "And now?" His smile was visible even in the darkness. "Now I'm still afraid sometimes. But I'm more afraid of not trying, of missing out on this." His hand found mine beneath the covers. "On us." It was perhaps the most honest answer he could have given, acknowledging the risk while choosing it anyway. I settled back against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. "The night of the storm," I said after a while. "When you came to my room, were you planning to tell me then?" He sighed softly. "Not exactly. I really was unsettled by the storm. That part wasn't a lie. But I think I was hoping something would happen. That being close to you might give me the courage to say what I was feeling. Or that maybe you would say it first." "Instead, we just fell asleep," I recalled with a quiet laugh. "Not the romantic revelation I'd imagined," he agreed, amusement in his voice. "But maybe it was better that way. A beginning rather than an ending." I liked that framing. That night not as a culmination, but as a first step on a path we were still traveling together. "I'm glad you climbed into my bed that night," I murmured, sleep beginning to tug at the edges of my consciousness. His arms tightened around me. "Me too," he whispered. "Best decision I ever made." Summer arrived with a heat wave that left our apartment sweltering despite the ancient air conditioning unit laboring in the window. We took to spending evenings on the roof, where at least the occasional breeze provided some relief, often staying out until stars appeared in the hazy city sky. On one such night, sprawled on the ancient chaise lounge we'd rescued from a neighbor's discarded furniture, Evan propped himself up on one elbow to look at me. "I got a call today," he said, an undercurrent of excitement in his voice. "From that environmental education center upstate. The one I applied to before." I nodded, remembering his application months ago for a position that combined his environmental science degree with his love of teaching. "They offered you the job?" They want me to come interview next week, he confirmed, eyes bright even in the dim rooftop lighting. It's a good opportunity, Noah, the kind I've been looking for since graduation. That's wonderful, I said sincerely, genuinely happy for him despite the immediate awareness that the position was over 2 hours away from our apartment. When would you start, if you get it? September, he said, which gives us time to figure things out. The us in his statement reassured me. He was already thinking of this as a shared decision, a shared future. You should take it if they offer, I told him, reaching up to brush hair from his forehead. It's perfect for you. He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. But what about you? Your life is here. You're writing your graduate program. My program ends in August, I reminded him. And I can write anywhere. I paused, considering. Actually, I might write better somewhere quieter. Somewhere with tree and space. The hope that bloomed on his face was beautiful to witness. You'd consider moving if I get the job? I'd more than consider it, I said. I'd want to. Where you go, I go. That's how this works for me. He kissed me then, a kiss filled with gratitude and promise and relief. When he pulled back, his expression was serious despite his smile. I don't want you to give up your dreams for mine, he said. I'd never ask that of you. I'm not giving up anything, I assured him, just changing the setting. The story stays the same. The metaphor pleased him. I could see it in the soft crinkles at the corners of his eyes. What story is that? Ours, I said simply. The one where we figure it out together, remember? He nodded, settling back beside me, his arm draped across my waist. I remember. We lay there in comfortable silence, watching the stars struggle to be seen through the city's light pollution. After a while, Evan spoke again, his voice thoughtful. I finished your book yesterday, the draft you gave me. I turned to look at him, surprised. He'd been reading the manuscript pages I'd finally shared with him, but I hadn't realized he'd reached the end. What did you think? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. He was quiet for a moment, considering his words. I think it's beautiful, he finally said. Honest in a way that hurts sometimes, but in a good way. The kind of hurt that helps you grow. Relief and pleasure washed through me at his assessment. Really? Really? His fingers traced idle patterns on my side. The ending especially. It felt earned, like the characters had been through enough to deserve their moment of peace. I smiled, remembering how the ending had changed as my own life had transformed. How my protagonist's journey had evolved alongside my own. I was thinking of submitting it, I admitted. To agents. It feels, ready. Evan's face lit up with genuine excitement. Noah, that's huge. You should absolutely do it. His unquestioning support warmed me more than the lingering heat of the day. It's scary, I confessed, letting other people read it. Judge it. Of course it is, he agreed, understanding immediately. You're putting part of yourself out into the world. That's always terrifying. He propped himself up again to look at me directly. But it's also brave and necessary. The world should get to experience your words, Noah. They matter. In that moment, looking up at him illuminated by the soft glow of the city lights, I felt a surge of gratitude so intense it almost overwhelmed me. For this man who believed in me, who saw me clearly and loved what he saw, who was willing to build a future with me one careful decision at a time. Thank you, I said softly, the words inadequate for what I was feeling but all I had to offer. He seemed to understand anyway, leaning down to kiss me gently. Always, he murmured against my lips. For as long as you'll let me. Evan got the job. We moved at the end of summer, packing our life together into a rented truck and driving north to a small town nestled between mountains and a winding river. Our new apartment was actually a tiny house on the property of a larger farm. 1 bedroom, a compact kitchen, and a small office space that became my writing room, with windows overlooking meadows rather than city streets. The transition wasn't without challenges. I missed the familiar rhythms of the city, the convenience of coffee shops on every corner, the ambient noise that had been the soundtrack to my writing for years. Evan struggled with imposter syndrome in his new role, coming home some days frustrated and questioning his abilities. But we faced each obstacle together, finding our way through with the foundation we'd built over the past year. Each difficulty overcome only strengthened our certainty that we'd made the right choice, not just in moving, but in choosing each other. On a crisp autumn evening, 6 months after that stormy night that had changed everything, we were walking along the river near our home. The trees were ablaze with color, red and gold leaves reflected in the water's surface. Evan's hand was warm in mine, our pace unhurried as we enjoyed the rare mutual day off. "I got an email today," I said casually, "from one of the agents I queried." Evan stopped walking, turning to face me. "And?" I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. "She wants to see the full manuscript." "Noah!" His exclamation of joy echoed across the water as he picked me up in an exuberant hug, spinning me around once before setting me back on my feet. "That's incredible." "It's just a request to read," I cautioned, trying to temper both his excitement and my own. "It doesn't mean she'll represent it." "It means she saw something in your words, see?" he countered, cupping my face in his hands. "Something special, which is exactly what I've been telling you all along." His faith in me was unwavering, a constant that still sometimes left me breathless. I leaned forward to kiss him, trying to pour my gratitude and love into the connection. "I have something for you," he said when we separated, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I was going to wait for a special occasion, but I think this qualifies." He pulled out a small box, and for one disorienting moment, I thought it might be a ring. Instead, when he opened it, I found a key. Old-fashioned and ornate, clearly not functional for any modern lock. "What's this?" I asked, taking it carefully. "A symbol," he explained, looking slightly self-conscious. "You once wrote in your journal that I don't feel things the way you do. That you feel too much, and I don't feel at all. Do you remember?" I nodded, surprised he knew about that entry. I must have shared it with him at some point, though I couldn't recall when. "I want you to know," he continued, earnestness in every line of his face, "that I feel everything. Sometimes so much it terrifies me. And this," he touched the key in my palm, "this is me giving you access to all of it. Every thought, every fear, every hope. No more holding back. No more pretending I'm not affected." He smiled softly. "It's symbolic, obviously, but the sentiment is real." I closed my fingers around the key, emotion tightening my throat. "When did you become such a romantic?" I managed to ask. "About the time I climbed into your bed during a thunderstorm," he replied, the lightness of his tone belied by the depth of feeling in his eyes, "and realized I never wanted to leave." We continued our walk along the river, the key safe in my pocket, our hands linked between us. The setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and pink, the coming evening cool, but not cold. In the distance, lights were beginning to appear in windows as dusk settled over the valley. "Do you ever miss the city?" Evan asked after a while. I considered the question honestly. Sometimes, the energy of it, the possibilities around every corner. I squeezed his hand. "But I love what we're building here. It feels intentional, like we're crafting our life together rather than just letting it happen to us." He nodded, understanding. "I feel that too. Like we're writing our own story." The metaphor made me smile. "Speaking of which, I've been thinking about starting something new, another novel." "Yeah?" His interest was immediate and genuine. "What about?" "Two people," I said, watching the last rays of sun glint off the water, "who find each other at exactly the right moment, even if it takes them a while to realize it." He bumped his shoulder against mine playfully. "Sounds familiar." "It might be slightly autobiographical," I admitted with a smile, "but with more dramatic tension and possibly a murder mystery subplot." He laughed, the sound carrying across the open air. "I look forward to reading it." As we turned to head home, the first stars appearing overhead and the air growing cooler, I was struck by a sense of fullness, of a story still unfolding but already rich with meaning. of promises kept and challenges overcome, of fear transformed into courage through the simple act of showing up day after day for the person you've chosen and who has chosen you in return. What are you thinking about? Evan asked, noticing my contemplative silence. I considered how to articulate the complexity of my thoughts, the depth of my gratitude for this life we were creating together. In the end, I settled for the simplest truth. I'm thinking that I'm glad you had a nightmare during that storm, I said, smiling up at him. Or pretended to. He laughed softly, wrapping an arm around my shoulders as we walked. Best fake nightmare I ever had. The path ahead wound through trees and alongside the river before eventually leading back to our small house with its warm lights and shared spaces. Not the end of our story, but a chapter we were writing together, word by careful word, day by meaningful day. And as the stars multiplied overhead and the river flowed steadily beside us, I held tightly to both the symbolic key in my pocket and the very real hand in mine. Grateful for thunderstorms, for courage found in darkness, and for all the quiet moments that had led us here, to this path, to this life, to each other.